Hello and welcome to the new season of the Drawn and Redrawn, the Making of India's Internal Boundaries podcast. This is a part of a larger India State Stories project that explores the evolution of India's political and administrative boundaries. This project is an undertaking by the Centre for Legislative Education and Research at Flame University in Pune. In this new season, we embark on a journey through the fascinating histories and narratives of each Indian state and union territories, exploring the pivotal events, influential personalities, and societal transformations that have shaped the subcontinent. In this 17th episode, we trace the important history behind the formation of the state of Maharashtra. This episode is based on a corresponding article written by our team at India State Stories. These articles have been converted to audio conversations with the help of Google's Notebook LM. You can find the relevant article link in the show notes. Now, let's dive into the conversation.
Today, we are tackling a giant. And I don't just mean geographically or economically, though it is, of course, massive in both those regards. We're looking at a state that acts as the commercial engine of India, but whose creation story is, well, it's a lot messier than I expected. We're talking about Maharashtra.
It really is a giant. And you're right, when we look at Maharashtra today, this unified block on the western coast, it looks permanent. It looks inevitable.
Exactly.
But the source material we have today, these archives and maps from the India State Stories project, they tell a very different story.
Reading through the notes, it feels less like a history lesson and more like a logic puzzle that no one could quite figure out how to solve for, 50 years?
That's the perfect analogy. It was a puzzle.
Yeah.
You had linguistic pieces, colonial pieces, and political pieces that just didn't fit together naturally. The map we see today is actually a collage. It didn't just appear. It was fought for, negotiated, and quite literally drawn and redrawn over decades.
So before we get into the lines on the map, and I definitely want to get into those because some of the early drafts of this state were honestly baffling.
They were.
I want to start where the source material starts. It talks about the spirit or the identity of the region long before it talks about administration. It uses words like valor and resistance. Why start there? Why is the vibe so crucial to the map?
Because you can't understand the administrative boundaries without understanding the psychological boundaries. The sources make it so clear. Maharashtra isn't just a piece of land, it's a stronghold. Historically, geographically, and culturally.
And that starts with the geography itself, right? You mean the Western Ghats?
Precisely. The Sahyadri Range. These aren't just pretty hills. They are natural fortifications. And the central figure who utilized that geography is obviously Chhatrapati Shivaji Maharaj. You cannot start this story without him.
Right.
But it's interesting how the sources frame him. It's not just about him being a king or a conqueror. It's about the fact that his forts in the Western Ghats were literal strongholds of resistance against larger imperial powers.
So the geography bred a specific type of political DNA.
In a way.
In a way, yes.
Yeah.
He laid the foundation for a Maratha empire rooted in ideas of self-rule or Swaraja and justice. And that indomitable spirit the text mentions becomes the bedrock for the political movements we see centuries later.
But there's another layer to this identity, which I thought was fascinating.
Yes, there is.
The social reformers. I was really struck by that. Usually when we talk about state borders, it's all politicians and treaties. But here, the source lists people like Shahu Maharaj, Jyotirao Phule, and Dr. B.R. Ambedkar.
It's essential to include them. The movement for Maharashtra wasn't just about language. It wasn't just, we speak Marathi, so we want a state.
It was more than that.
Much more. It was about social justice. Shahu Maharaj was championing education for the oppressed. Phule was fighting for the rights of the peasantry. And Dr. Ambedkar, he is a titan of progressive ideals and the architect of the Constitution.
So the argument was that a unified Marathi state would be a vehicle for these progressive values.
That's the key connection. It was a demand for a state that reflected self-respect and social reform. So when we look at the map, for the people drawing it, it was meant to be a beacon of resistance and reform, not just an administrative zone.
Okay, so we have this strong, cohesive identity, this mix of warrior heritage and radical social reform. You'd think that would make drawing a map easy.
You would think.
But let's look at the reality before independence. If I time traveled back to, say, 1940 under the British Raj, and I asked for a map of Maharashtra, I'd get a blank stare, wouldn't I?
You would be handed a map of something called Bombay Province, and let me tell you, that was an administrative nightmare.
How big are we talking?
Massive. But more than that, it was incoherent. It wasn't drawn based on who lived there or what language they spoke. It was drawn based on British imperial convenience.
Why?
It stretched all the way from the border of Mysore in the south, so deep into Canada-speaking territory, all the way up northwest, past the Marathi areas to include parts of what is now Gujarat, and even towards Sindh.
It even wrapped around Goa.
Yes, it hugged the Portuguese colony of Goa, just this long, massive coastal strip. Imagine trying to govern that.
So 1947 hits, independence, then 1950 the Constitution. The British are gone. Does the new Indian government look at this map and say, okay, this makes no sense, let's fix it?
They tried to fix it, but not by making it smaller or more logical linguistically. In 1950, they actually made it bigger in some ways. They took this massive Bombay province and merged it with the princely state of Baroda.
Baroda, that's in Gujarat, so they just added more non-Marathi speaking areas.
Essentially, yes. They formed Bombay state. The capital was Bombay City, modern Mumbai, which makes sense economically. But here's the problem. This is the crux of the puzzle we talked about.
Go on.
You have an administrative unit called Bombay State. But where are the Marathi speakers?
Well, they're in Bombay.
They are. But they're also scattered in 3 other completely different administrative jurisdictions. This is where the making of Maharashtra becomes a game of Tetris.
Okay, walk me through this. This is the linguistic puzzle part of our notes. Where were all the Marathi people hiding?
Imagine the Marathi population is a jigsaw puzzle thrown into 4 different boxes.
Okay.
Box 1 is Bombay State, the coastal strip in western Maharashtra we just talked about. Box 2 is Greater Bombay City itself, the urban heart.
All right, cosmopolitan, but with a Marathi core.
Then box 3 is Vidarbha.
Vidarbha today, that's the eastern part of Maharashtra. Where was it back then?
It was sitting in central India. It was part of the central provinces and Berar, and later Madhya Pradesh. Administratively, it looked north toward Bhopal, not west toward Mumbai.
In a 4th box.
Marathwada. This region was actually part of the Hyderabad state, so you had Marathi people living under the rule of the Nizam of Hyderabad.
Wow, so the same language, same culture, split across a British province, a central province, and a princely state. That seems incredibly difficult to unify.
It was. And the movement to fix this, to unify these 4 pieces, goes back way before independence.
Yeah.
The Samyukta Maharashtra Parishad really kicked into high gear in 1946.
And their goal was clear. Bring these 4 pieces together.
Exactly. But they had to convince the people inside those regions that they should be together.
Which brings us to the Nagpur Pact of 1953. I read this in the source, and it felt like a prenuptial agreement.
That's a brilliant way to describe it. It was exactly that. You have to understand the anxiety. The people in Vidarbha were distinct. They were thinking, if we join this massive state with Bombay, will we be ignored? Will all the powers stay on the coast?
A very valid concern. I think that sentiment still pops up in politics today.
It is. So the Nagpur Pact was the assurance. It guaranteed equitable development, government jobs, and this is key, that the state legislature would hold at least 1 session a year in Nagpur.
So is the condition for the marriage.
It was. They were essentially saying, we will join you, but you have to promise to treat us as equals.
Okay, so the plan is set, the logic is sound, the prenup is signed, 1956 rolls around, the States Reorganization Act. This is the big moment. Do the Marathi people get their wish?
Logic is a funny thing in politics. The answer is a resounding no.
No, but they signed the pact.
Instead of giving them a Marathi state, the government created what is known as the bilingual experiment. And I use the word experiment because it really felt like they were testing how much stress a state could take before it broke.
What exactly did they do?
On November 1st, 1956, they reshuffled the deck. They did bring in Marathwada from Hyderabad, and they did bring in Vidarbha from Madhya Pradesh.
Okay, so far so good. That matches the Nagpur Pact.
But instead of stopping there, they attached Kutch and Saurashtra to the state.
Wait, Kutch and Saurashtra are Gujarati-speaking regions.
Correct. And just to twist the knife a bit, they took the southern districts, Belgaum, Bijapur, Dharwar, and sent them to Mysore state because they spoke Kannada.
Hold on, let me get this straight. They applied the linguistic logic to the south and said, you speak Kannada, go to Mysore. But for the Marathi and Gujarati speakers, they said, you two just figure it out together.
That is exactly what happened. They created this massive bilingual Bombay state.
Why? What was the thinking there?
Well, it wasn't spite, it was fear. There was a genuine fear in Delhi that organizing states purely by language would lead to balkanization. They wanted large composite states. Also, the business elite in Bombay were terrified of a purely Marathi state.
I can imagine that cosmopolitan setup wasn't very popular on the streets, though.
Unpopular is an understatement. It was explosive. You had two massive movements rising up. The Samyukta Maharashtra Samiti wanting a Marathi state.
And the Mahagujarat Andolan wanting a Gujarati state.
Exactly. It's rare in politics to see two opposing sides wanting the exact same outcome. A divorce.
They both wanted out.
The marriage was a disaster, the protests were intense, the bilingual state was dysfunctional because the political will just wasn't there.
And this went on for 4 years.
Roughly. The breaking point really came after the 1957 elections. The ruling party realized they were losing the people. You can't govern a population that fundamentally rejects the map you've drawn for them.
So enter Y.B. Chavan.
Yes, Yashwantrao B. Chavan. He was the chief minister of this messy bilingual state. He was a shrewd politician. He realized this wasn't sustainable.
He became the divorce lawyer.
In a way, yes. He went to the Union government and argued that for the sake of security and administration, the split had to happen. And he was successful. On May 1st, 1960, a date now celebrated as Maharashtra Day, the map was finally redrawn.
And the bilingual state was split.
Kutch and Saurashtra left to form the new state of Gujarat. And the remaining territory, Bombay, Vidarbha, Marathwada, Western Maharashtra, became the state of Maharashtra.
And Y.B. Chavan stays on as the first chief minister.
He does. And that marks the end of the external puzzle. The outline of the state was finally sewn together.
So 1960, you have the map, story over, right? We can wrap up.
You would think so. But this brings us to the second half of our source material, the district evolution charts.
Right. I was looking at this data. It seems like once they settled the outside border, the walls of the house, they started obsessing over the inside borders.
Absolutely. This is the concept of administrative refinement. Just because you have a state doesn't mean you can run it effectively. Populations grow, cities expand.
And the old districts are too large.
Exactly. The source calls this bifurcation. It looks like cell division.
It really does. One district becomes two. I noticed a massive wave of this in the 1980s and 90s. What was driving that?
Usually it's driven by two main things, accessibility and urbanization. Let's look at 1981. You have the coastal district of Ratnagiri. It's long and hilly. Getting to the headquarters was a multi-day journey for some.
So they split it.
Yes, they carved out Sindhudurg. In the same year, Aurangabad, which was growing fast, split to create Jalna. It brings the government closer to the people.
It's strictly practical.
Mostly, but sometimes it is about specific needs. Take 1982. Chandrapur splits to create Gadchiroli. Now, Gadchiroli is heavily tribal, very forested. It needed a specific type of administration.
A different kind of focus.
Right. Then comes the big one, the one that defines modern India, 1990.
Let me guess. Mumbai.
Greater Bombay.
Right.
The population density was becoming astronomical. You simply cannot govern a city that size as one district. So they split it into Mumbai City and Mumbai Suburban.
That's a pure urbanization split. The city literally outgrew the map.
Exactly. And the tinkering continued. The late 90s were frantic. In 98, Doo splits into Nandurbar again, a district with a high tribal population. Akola splits into Washim.
And the very next year, 1999, we see two more. Bandara gives us Gandia, and Barbani gives us Hingoli.
It's incredible, isn't it? The source notes that between 1972 and 1981 alone, there were 9 name changes and 2 splits. It's like the government was constantly tuning the engine.
And it hasn't stopped. The most recent data point in our source is from 2014.
Yes, the creation of Palghar.
I remember this one. This was carved out of Thane, right?
Correct. Thane had become impossible to manage. It was adjacent to Mumbai, exploding with commuters. It was the most populous district in the entire country at one point.
So it had to be split.
It had to be, to ensure the rural and tribal parts weren't completely overshadowed by the urban sprawl. So on August 1st, 2014, Palghar was born.
So if we zoom out, we went from the sprawling Bombay province to the tension of the bilingual experiment, to the formation of the state in 1960, and finally down to splitting Thane in 2014.
It's a journey from imperial convenience to linguistic identity and finally to administrative efficiency.
That's a great way to frame it. It shows that the map isn't static.
That is the main takeaway. We look at a map and think, this is the truth, this is how it is. But the story of Maharashtra proves that a map is a living document. It breathes, it expands and contracts based on who we are.
It's a mechanism for solving problems.
Yeah.
Sometimes the problem is we speak a different language, and sometimes is the collector's office is too far away.
Precisely. The map of Maharashtra today honors those initial struggles, the values of Shivaji and Ambedkar, but it also reflects the modern reality of managing millions of people.
So here's a question for you to mull over as we wrap up. We saw the last big split in 2014 with Polgar. Do you think the map of Maharashtra is finished? Or are there more lines waiting to be drawn?
If history is any indicator, I would say we are never truly finished.
That's what I was thinking, with cities like Pune and Nagpur growing the way they are.
Exactly. As long as populations shift, as long as new economic centers emerge, and as long as people demand better governance, the map will have to adapt. The lines we see today might just be the current draft.
Something to think about. The next time you look at a district map and assume it's set in stone, it might just be waiting for the next redraw.
Indeed.
Thanks for joining us on this deep dive into the making of Maharashtra.
My pleasure.
And thank you for listening. See you next time.